The morning sun barely touched the edges of the Mongolian desert when Dr. Elena Vasquez heard the first strange sound. She had been working at the remote geological survey camp for 3 weeks, documenting unusual rock formations that seemed to defy explanation. The sound came again, a high-pitched chirping that didn't belong to any bird she knew. Elena paused from packing her equipment and listened carefully. The chirping was coming from somewhere near the cliff face where she had been taking samples yesterday. Something about the sound made her heart race. It wasn't just unusual, it was desperate. As the lead xenogeologist for the International Space Research Consortium, Elena had spent years studying meteorite impact sites and unusual geological formations. She had seen things that would make most people question their sanity. But nothing had prepared her for what she was about to discover. The chirping grew louder as she approached the cliff face. Elena noticed that the rocks here were different from anything she had cataloged before. They had a metallic sheen and seemed to pulse with an inner warmth. Her instruments had detected unusual electromagnetic readings in this area, but she had attributed them to mineral deposits. Following the sound, Elena found herself at the base of what appeared to be a massive boulder. But as she got closer, she realized it wasn't a boulder at all. The surface was too smooth, too perfectly rounded. It looked almost like an enormous egg, roughly 12 feet tall and 8 feet wide. The chirping was definitely coming from inside. Elena's hands trembled as she ran them along the surface. The shell was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate slightly. Hairline cracks had begun to form near the base, and through one of the larger fissures, she could see movement. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself, but her scientific training kicked in. She pulled out her phone and began documenting everything. The shell's composition appeared to be some kind of organic metal she had never encountered before. Her radiation detector showed no dangerous levels, but there were definitely energy readings unlike anything in her experience. As Elena circled the massive egg, she discovered it wasn't alone. Hidden among the rocks and partially buried in the sand were 4 more eggs of similar size. All of them showed signs of imminent hatching. The chirping was coming from all 5 eggs now, creating a symphony of urgent, almost musical sounds. The cracks in the first egg began spreading rapidly. Elena backed away, unsure of what to expect. Through the growing gaps in the shell, she caught glimpses of scales that seemed to shift color in the sunlight, sometimes appearing deep blue, sometimes silver, sometimes a rich purple that reminded her of distant nebulae. With a sound like breaking glass, a section of the shell fell away. What emerged was beyond anything Elena could have imagined. A creature roughly the size of a large dog pushed its way out of the egg. It had the basic body structure of what ancient myths would call a dragon, but it was clearly not from Earth. The hatchling's scales shimmered with an inner light. Its eyes were large and intelligent, a deep amber color that seemed to hold depths Elena couldn't fathom. Small wings, still wet from the egg, trembled as the creature took its first breaths of Earth's atmosphere. Most remarkably, the creature seemed to be partially translucent, as if it existed in more dimensions than the 3 Elena was familiar with. The hatchling looked directly at Elena and made a soft trilling sound. There was no fear in its gaze, only curiosity and what Elena could only describe as hope. The creature took a tentative step toward her, stumbled slightly on unsteady legs, then tried again. "Hello there," Elena said softly, crouching down to appear less threatening. "You're not from around here, are you?" The hatchling tilted its head at the sound of her voice. Elena noticed that when it moved, small sparks of what looked like stardust fell from its scales. The creature's breathing seemed to create tiny aurora-like patterns in the air around it. More cracking sounds drew Elena's attention to the other eggs. The second egg was beginning to hatch, and Elena could see that this hatchling had scales of a different color, deep emerald green with veins of gold running through them. As each egg began to crack open, Elena realized she was witnessing the birth of 5 beings from another world. But as the second hatchling emerged, Elena noticed something troubling. This one seemed weaker than the first. It struggled to break free from its shell, and once it did, it collapsed almost immediately. The little creature was breathing rapidly and shallow, and its scales lacked the vibrant glow of its sibling. Elena's medical training from her early career kicked in. She approached the struggling hatchling carefully and noticed that its egg had been partially crushed. The shell showed impact damage, as if something heavy had struck it. The creature inside had been confined to a much smaller space than nature intended. Squished like sardines, Elena murmured, remembering her grandmother's phrase. She examined the remaining eggs and found that 3 of the 5 showed similar damage. The shells had been compressed, forcing the developing creatures into cramped positions that clearly weren't healthy. As Elena pondered how to help, the first hatchling approached her again. This time, it gently touched her hand with its snout. The moment of contact sent a jolt through Elena's consciousness. Suddenly, she could sense the creature's thoughts, not in words but in emotions and images. The hatchling was trying to communicate. Elena saw flashes of space, of distant stars, of a world where creatures like these soared between planets. She sensed urgency and concern for the other hatchlings. The healthy one knew its siblings were in trouble. Elena looked at the damaged eggs with new understanding. These weren't just rare creatures hatching. They were refugees from a cosmic disaster, and they needed her help to survive. The third egg cracked open, revealing a hatchling with scales like burnished copper. This one was in better condition, but still showed signs of distress. As Elena watched, she began to understand the scope of what was happening. These creatures were not random visitors to Earth. They had been sent here deliberately, their eggs launched from their dying homeworld as a desperate attempt to preserve their species. Elena's mind raced as she processed the implications. She was holding the fate of an entire alien species in her hands. The healthy hatchling continued to nuzzle against her, sharing more images. Elena saw a beautiful world with crystal cities and dragons soaring through aurora-filled skies. She felt the anguish of parents making the ultimate sacrifice, sending their offspring across the void in hopes that someone, somewhere, would care enough to help. The fourth egg began showing cracks, but the fifth remained ominously still. Elena approached it and pressed her ear against the shell. She could hear the faintest heartbeat inside, but it was irregular and weak. This hatchling might not make it without intervention. Elena made a decision that would change her life forever. She couldn't stand by and watch these magnificent beings die. Whatever they were, wherever they came from, they were now her responsibility. She began carefully examining the damaged shells, looking for ways to help the trapped hatchlings without injuring them further. The first hatchling seemed to understand what she was trying to do. It began making different sounds, soft, encouraging chirps directed at the unhatched eggs. Elena watched in amazement as the creature's scales began to glow brighter, and the air around the eggs shimmered with the same aurora-like patterns. Elena realized the healthy hatchling was sharing its energy with its siblings, trying to give them strength to break free. But Elena could see that even this remarkable act of compassion wouldn't be enough for the most severely damaged eggs. Working carefully with her geological tools, Elena began helping to enlarge the cracks in the fourth egg. The creature inside was alive, but clearly struggling. Its scales were deep purple-black, and when it finally emerged, Elena could see that one of its wings was malformed from the cramped conditions in the shell. The purple hatchling looked up at Elena with the same intelligent amber eyes as its siblings. Despite its physical challenges, the creature's spirit seemed unbroken. It chirped weakly and tried to stand, falling over, but immediately attempting to rise again. Elena's heart broke and soared simultaneously. These creatures possessed an indomitable will to live that reminded her why she had become a scientist in the first place. They represented the incredible resilience of life itself. The fifth egg remained the most concerning. Elena could still detect a heartbeat, but The shell was severely damaged. Large sections had been crushed, and she feared that trying to break it open might harm the creature inside. She needed to think of another approach. The healthy hatchling had been watching Elena's efforts intently. Suddenly, it approached the fifth egg and began making a different kind of sound, a low, resonant humming that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. The other three hatchlings, despite their weakness, gathered around and joined the humming. Elena watched in wonder as the combined vibrations of the four hatchlings began to resonate through the damaged shell. Slowly, very slowly, hairline cracks began to spread across the surface in a deliberate pattern. The creatures were using some kind of harmonic frequency to weaken the shell from the outside, helping their trapped sibling without causing harmful vibrations inside. After nearly an hour of sustained effort, the fifth hatchling began to emerge. This one was smaller than the others and moved more slowly, but its scales were perhaps the most beautiful Elena had ever seen, a shifting rainbow that seemed to capture and reflect every color of the spectrum. All five hatchlings were now free, but Elena could see they faced new challenges. The three that had been compressed in damaged shells were clearly struggling with various physical limitations. They would need special care if they were going to survive. Elena looked at her phone and realized she had been documenting everything for over 6 hours. The sun was now high overhead, and she needed to make some serious decisions. She couldn't simply walk away and pretend this never happened. But she also couldn't reveal the existence of these creatures without careful consideration of the consequences. The hatchlings seemed to sense her internal conflict. The healthy one approached and touched her hand again, sharing more images. Elena saw herself caring for them, helping them grow stronger. She felt their trust and gratitude, but also their vulnerability. They were completely dependent on her now. Elena made her second life-changing decision of the day. She would take them back to her camp and figure out how to care for them. Whatever it took, she would not let these remarkable beings die on her watch. As she began preparing to transport the hatchlings, Elena noticed something extraordinary. When the five creatures were close together, their scales began to resonate in harmony, creating patterns of light that danced between them. They were clearly designed to work as a group, to support and strengthen each other. Elena carefully gathered the hatchlings, surprised by how light they were despite their size. Their translucent nature seemed to extend to their physical weight as well. She made multiple trips to bring all five back to her camp, setting up a makeshift nursery in her largest research tent. Once all the hatchlings were safely in the tent, Elena began taking detailed notes on their behavior and needs. They seemed to require no immediate food, which puzzled her until she realized they might absorb energy directly from their environment. Their scales grew brighter when exposed to sunlight and dimmed in shade. The healthy hatchling continued to serve as a caretaker for its siblings, sharing energy and comfort. Elena watched as it gently groomed the scales of the injured ones, its touch causing their colors to brighten temporarily. As evening approached, Elena faced new questions. How would these creatures adapt to Earth's atmosphere long-term? What would they eat as they grew? How could she protect them from discovery while ensuring they received proper care? The hatchlings seemed to sense nightfall approaching and began clustering together in the center of the tent. Their scales dimmed to a soft glow that provided just enough light to see by. Elena realized they were entering some kind of rest state, their breathing becoming slower and more synchronized. Elena sat nearby, watching over them as they slept. The responsibility of what she had undertaken began to sink in fully. She was now the guardian of five beings from another world, creatures that might hold the key to understanding life beyond Earth. But as she looked at their peaceful forms, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years of scientific research, a sense of profound connection to something greater than herself. These creatures had traveled across the cosmos and survived against impossible odds. They had chosen to trust her with their lives. Elena pulled out her laptop and began writing her first report, carefully documenting everything that had happened while avoiding any details that might reveal the true nature of her discovery. She would need time to understand what she was dealing with before making any decisions about revealing their existence to the world. As she wrote, one of the injured hatchlings stirred and looked at her with those remarkable amber eyes. Elena felt a wave of gratitude and affection that nearly brought her to tears. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she had made the right choice. The adventure was just beginning. Elena woke before dawn to the sound of soft shrilling coming from the research tent. Her makeshift alarm clock wasn't the usual beeping device, but rather 5 alien hatchlings greeting the sunrise. During the night, something remarkable had happened. The injured hatchlings appeared stronger, their colors more vibrant than when they had first emerged from their damaged shells. As Elena entered the tent, she discovered the source of the improvement. The healthy hatchling had positioned itself in the center of the group throughout the night, its scales glowing steadily as it shared energy with its siblings. The creature had sacrificed its own rest to help the others heal. Elena knelt beside them and noticed that the hatchling with the malformed wing showed the most dramatic improvement. The wing, which had been twisted and undersized yesterday, now appeared to be developing properly. The bone structure was straightening, and new scale growth was filling in the gaps. "You're remarkable," Elena whispered to the caretaker hatchling. It looked up at her and made a soft chirping sound that she was beginning to interpret as contentment or agreement. Elena had spent most of the previous night researching everything she could find about dragon mythology, alien life theories, and xenobiology. While none of her academic resources prepared her for the reality of caring for actual extraterrestrial beings, she had developed some theories about their needs. The hatchlings seemed to thrive on electromagnetic energy and light spectrum variations. Elena had noticed that they were most active during sunrise and sunset, when the light contained the full spectrum of colors. During the middle of the day, they became more subdued, as if the intense direct sunlight was too much for them. Elena decided to test her theory. She pulled out her portable spectrum analyzer and began adjusting the light filters in the tent. When she created conditions similar to dawn light, all 5 hatchlings became more animated. Their scales brightened, and they began making musical chirping sounds to each other. "So you prefer the gentle light," Elena said, making notes on her tablet. "That makes sense for beings from a different star system. Your sun probably had different characteristics." The caretaker hatchling approached Elena and gently touched the tablet with its snout. Suddenly, Elena's screen filled with images that definitely hadn't come from any earthly database. She saw a brilliant orange star surrounded by multiple worlds, with creatures like her hatchlings soaring between planets as if space itself was just another medium to swim through. Elena watched in fascination as the images showed vast cities built in space, connected by streams of living light. The adult versions of her hatchlings were magnificent beyond description, some the size of small aircraft, their wings creating aurora displays as they moved through the cosmic void. But then the images turned darker. Elena saw the orange star beginning to destabilize, its light flickering and growing dim. The space cities were abandoned as the star entered its death phase. In desperate final efforts, the adult dragons had gathered their eggs and launched them toward distant stars, hoping some would find hospitable worlds. Elena felt tears forming as she understood the full scope of what these hatchlings represented. They weren't just alien visitors. They were the sole survivors of a dying civilization. The weight of responsibility she felt multiplied tenfold. "Your parents sent you here hoping someone would care," Elena said softly. "They chose our son because it was similar enough to yours that you might survive." The hatchlings seemed to understand her words, or at least her emotions. They gathered around her, their combined presence creating a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Elena felt their trust and acceptance, and she knew there was no turning back from the path she had chosen. Over the next several days, Elena established a routine for caring for the hatchlings. She discovered they didn't eat food in any conventional sense. Instead, they absorbed energy from light, electromagnetic fields, and even the Earth's magnetic field itself. They seemed to process minerals directly through their scales, extracting what they needed from the environment. The hatchlings grew rapidly, but not uniformly. Each one developed unique characteristics that reflected their individual personalities. The caretaker, which Elena had begun calling Aurora because of its light-giving abilities, remained the largest and strongest. Its scales had developed intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living art. The second hatchling, which Elena named Ember for its copper-colored scales, showed remarkable intelligence and curiosity. It was constantly exploring the camp, examining Elena's equipment with careful attention. Ember had recovered completely from its initial weakness and now displayed an almost scientific interest in understanding its new environment. The third hatchling, Mist, had scales of shifting blue and silver that reminded Elena of fog rolling over mountains. Mist was the most empathetic of the group, always the first to comfort any sibling that seemed distressed. It had developed the strongest mental connection with Elena and often shared emotional impressions rather than visual images. The fourth hatchling, Shadow, with its purple-black scales, had overcome its wing malformation entirely. In fact, Shadow now showed signs of being the most aerodynamically gifted of the group. Its wings had grown larger in proportion to its body than the others, and it spent hours practicing gliding movements even though it was still too young to actually fly. The fifth hatchling, Prism, remained the smallest but had developed the most spectacular appearance. Its rainbow scales created dazzling light displays whenever it moved. Elena discovered that Prism could actually bend light around itself, becoming nearly invisible when it wanted to hide. Each hatchling brought something unique to the group dynamic. They had formed a complex social structure with Aurora as the natural leader and protector, Ember as the explorer and problem solver, Mist as the emotional center, Shadow as the scout and future guardian, and Prism as the artist and light weaver. Elena found herself learning as much from them as they were learning about Earth. The hatchlings communicated in harmonics that created complex emotional and conceptual exchanges. Elena began to pick up some of their communication methods, discovering she could send simple emotional impressions back to them. But Elena's peaceful routine was disrupted on the 8th day when she received an unexpected radio message from her base camp supervisor, Dr. Marcus Webb. Elena, we've been getting some unusual electromagnetic readings from your sector. The satellite monitoring shows energy signatures that don't match any known geological phenomena. Are you conducting any experiments we should know about? Elena's heart raced. She looked at the 5 hatchlings, who had all turned toward her with apparent understanding that something was wrong. Their scales had dimmed, and they were making soft, worried sounds. Just the standard geological surveys. Marcus, Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. My equipment might be picking up some unusual mineral deposits. I'll double-check the calibrations. Make sure you do. We've also had reports of unusual lights in the sky over your area. Local pilots have filed reports of aurora-like phenomena that shouldn't be possible given current atmospheric conditions. Elena realized that the hatchling's presence was creating detectable effects that extended beyond her camp. Their natural energy emissions were interacting with Earth's electromagnetic field in ways she hadn't anticipated. After ending the radio conversation, Elena sat with the hatchlings to explain the situation. Using the tablet, she showed them satellite images of their location and tried to communicate that other humans were becoming aware of their presence. Aurora, the caretaker hatchling, shared an image that made Elena's blood run cold. She saw military vehicles and helicopters surrounding a research camp, scientists in protective suits taking away creatures that looked very much like her hatchlings. You've seen this before, Elena said, understanding. Your people have encountered humans who didn't react kindly. The hatchlings clustered together, their scales dimming with what Elena could only interpret as fear. Miss shared an emotional impression of confusion and betrayal the feeling of being studied like specimens rather than treated as intelligent beings. Elena made her third major decision. She had to find a way to hide the hatchlings until she could figure out how to protect them permanently. But first, she needed to understand the full scope of their abilities and needs. Over the following days, Elena worked intensively with each hatchling to understand their capabilities. What she discovered amazed her. These beings weren't just intelligent. They possessed abilities that bordered on what humans would consider supernatural. Aurora could manipulate electromagnetic fields with remarkable precision. It could generate light, create small electrical charges, and even influence the behavior of Elena's electronic equipment. Elena realized that Aurora was actually learning to interface directly with human technology. Ember demonstrated an extraordinary ability to analyze and understand complex systems. It could look at Elena's geological equipment and somehow understand its function and limitations. Ember began making suggestions for improvements, communicating through shared images of modified devices that would be more efficient. Miss showed empathic abilities that extended beyond emotional connection. It could sense the health and well-being of other creatures from considerable distances. Elena discovered this when Mist became agitated and led her to an injured bird nearly a quarter-mile from camp. Shadow's abilities centered around stealth and protection. It could move with complete silence and seemed to bend shadows around itself, even in daylight. Elena suspected Shadow was already serving as an early warning system, scouting the perimeter of their camp for potential threats. Prism's light manipulation abilities proved to be the most complex. It could create illusions, bend light to make objects appear different than they were, and even generate complex holographic displays. Elena realized that Prism might be the key to hiding the group from detection. Working together, the hatchlings could combine their abilities in ways that multiplied their effectiveness. When they coordinated their efforts, they could create electromagnetic camouflage that would make their energy signatures nearly undetectable to human instruments. Elena began training them to use these abilities defensively. She set up practice sessions where the hatchlings would hide from her detection equipment using various combinations of their powers. Within days, they had become remarkably skilled at avoiding electronic surveillance. But Elena knew that hiding was only a temporary solution. The hatchlings were growing rapidly and would soon be too large to conceal in her research camp. She needed a long-term plan that would allow them to survive and thrive while remaining safe from human interference. Elena spent hours studying topographical maps of the region, looking for locations where the hatchlings could live undetected. She found several possibilities: remote mountain valleys, underground cave systems, and isolated plateaus that were rarely visited by humans. But when she shared these options with the hatchlings, their response surprised her. Through shared images and emotions, they communicated that they didn't want to hide permanently. They wanted to find a way to coexist with humans, to share their knowledge and abilities in ways that would benefit both species. Aurora shared an image that took Elena's breath away. She saw a future where humans and dragons worked together, where the advanced technology of dragon civilization combined with human ingenuity to solve problems neither could address alone. She saw spacecraft designed with dragon biotechnology exploring distant stars, and human cities enhanced with dragon energy systems that eliminated pollution and scarcity. "You want to help us," Elena said with wonder. "Even after everything your people might have experienced, you still want to help humanity." The hatchlings gathered around her, their scales brightening with what Elena had learned to recognize as hope and determination. They communicated that they understood the risks, but they also understood the potential. Their parents had sent them not just to survive, but to build bridges between worlds. Elena realized she faced a choice that would impact not just her own life, but potentially the future of both species. She could continue hiding the hatchlings until they were strong enough to survive on their own, where she could begin the delicate process of introducing them to carefully selected humans who might be trusted to help rather than exploit them. As if sensing her internal struggle, Mist approached and shared one final image. Elena saw herself standing before a small group of scientists and officials with the 5 hatchlings beside her. In the vision, the humans looked amazed but not frightened. They were extending hands and greeting rather than reaching for weapons. "You think we can find the right people," Elena said. "People who will see you as friends rather than specimens." Elena looked at each of the hatchlings, these remarkable beings who had traveled across the cosmos to find refuge on Earth. They had survived the destruction of their homeworld, the trauma of damaged shells, and the uncertainty of relying on an alien species for survival. Their courage and optimism humbled her. Elena made her fourth and most important decision. She would begin carefully reaching out to specific individuals in the scientific community who might be trusted to help protect and nurture these incredible beings. The hatchlings deserved better than a life in hiding, and humanity deserved the chance to prove it could be worthy of such remarkable friends. The next phase of their journey would be the most dangerous yet, but Elena was no longer facing alone. She had 5 extraordinary allies who had already proven they could overcome impossible odds. Together, they would find a way to build the bridge between worlds that the hatchlings' parents had dreamed of when they launched their children toward the stars. Elena's hands trembled as she composed the most important email of her career. After 2 weeks of careful consideration, she had identified 3 individuals who might be trusted with the secret of the hatchlings' existence. Each represented a different aspect of what would be needed to protect and nurture the young dragons. The first was Dr. Sarah Chun, a xenobiologist at the International Space Research Consortium who had spent her career searching for evidence of extraterrestrial life. Elena had worked with Sarah on previous projects and trusted her scientific integrity and open-minded approach to unprecedented discoveries. The second was Colonel James Harrison, a retired military officer who now worked as a security consultant for sensitive scientific projects. Elena had met him during a conference on protecting vulnerable research subjects. His background suggested he would understand the security implications of the hatchlings' presence while respecting their rights as intelligent beings. The third was Dr. Maria Santos, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery and had experience working with nonverbal communication methods. Elena believed that Dr. Santos might be able to help the hatchlings process their experiences while also understanding their emotional and developmental needs. Elena crafted 3 separate emails, each tailored to the recipient's background and likely concerns. She didn't reveal the full truth in the initial messages, but rather invited each person to visit her research site to discuss a discovery that requires discretion and expertise in your particular field. As Elena sent the emails, the hatchlings gathered around her workstation. They seemed to understand the significance of what she was doing. Aurora placed a gentle claw on her shoulder, sharing an image of support and encouragement. "This is the beginning of your introduction to my world," Elena told them. "These are people I believe will see you as I do, as remarkable beings deserving of respect and protection." The hatchlings had continued to grow and develop during the weeks of their hidden existence. They were now roughly the size of large horses, though their translucent nature made them appear less massive than their actual dimensions. Their abilities had also evolved considerably. Aurora had become sophisticated in its manipulation of electromagnetic fields. It could now interface directly with Elena's computer systems, accessing and processing information at incredible speeds. The creature had developed an understanding of human technology that surpassed many engineers. Ember had begun creating what Elena could only describe as inventions. Using its ability to manipulate matter at the molecular level, Ember had constructed devices that improved the efficiency of Elena's solar panels by 300% and created a water purification system that had no moving parts, but could clean even the most contaminated water sources. Mist had developed empathic abilities so refined that it could sense the emotional states of humans from miles away. Elena had discovered this when Mist became agitated and led her to a hiking trail where they found an injured tourist who had fallen and was unable to call for help. Shadow had grown into the group's protector and scout. Its stealth abilities now extended to partial interdimensional phasing. It could move through solid objects and become completely invisible to both visual and electronic detection. Shadow had taken on the responsibility of monitoring the approaches to their camp and had already guided several curious wildlife researchers away from the area without their knowledge. Prism had become an artist of light and reality itself. Its illusion abilities were so sophisticated that it could create entire false landscapes that were indistinguishable from reality. Elena had watched in amazement as Prism transformed their campsite into what appeared to be empty desert whenever aircraft passed overhead. Together, the 5 hatchlings had developed group abilities that bordered on miraculous. They could link their consciousness to share knowledge instantaneously, combine their individual powers to create effects far beyond what any single creature could accomplish, and coordinate their actions with precision that suggested they operated as a collective entity when necessary. But, perhaps most remarkably, they had begun to truly understand human nature. Through their interactions with Elena and their observations of human behavior patterns transmitted through electronic media, the hatchlings had developed sophisticated insights into human psychology, culture, and social structures. Elena received responses to her emails within hours. All 3 of her chosen contacts expressed intense curiosity and agreed to visit her research site within the week. Elena felt a mixture of excitement and terror as she realized there was no turning back from the path she had chosen. Dr. Sarah Chun arrived first, flying in by helicopter to Elena's remote camp. Elena had prepared carefully for this moment, positioning the hatchlings in a hidden chamber that Prism had created using its illusion abilities. The space appeared to be solid rock, but was actually a comfortable cavern where the 5 creatures could observe without being seen. Elena, your message was intriguingly vague, Dr. Chun said as they walked through the camp. What exactly have you discovered that requires such secrecy? Elena led her to the tent where she had first cared for the newly hatched dragons. Sarah, what I'm about to show you will challenge everything we think we know about life in the universe. I need you to promise me that regardless of your initial reaction, you'll give me time to explain fully before making any decisions about what to do with this information. Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. Elena, you're starting to worry me. What kind of discovery are we talking about? Elena took a deep breath and activated the tablet that Aurora had learned to interface with. The screen filled with the images the hatchlings had shared with her, the dying star system, the space cities, the desperate launch of the egg containers toward distant stars. These images weren't created by any human technology, Elena said quietly. They're memories shared with me by beings that traveled across interstellar space to reach our world. Dr. Chen studied the images carefully, her scientific training overriding her initial skepticism. The detail is extraordinary, she murmured. The astronomical data embedded in these images. Elena, where did these really come from? Elena gestured toward the hidden chamber. They came from 5 remarkable beings who are waiting to meet you, if you're ready to have your understanding of the universe expanded forever. Elena gave a subtle hand signal, and the wall of the tent seemed to shimmer and fade away, revealing the cavern where the 5 hatchlings waited. Prism had outdone itself. The creatures were displayed in perfect lighting that showcased their magnificent scales and intelligent eyes. Dr. Chen's reaction was everything Elena had hoped for. Instead of fear or shock, her face lit up with pure scientific wonder. My God, she whispered. They're beautiful. They're actually beautiful. Aurora stepped forward and extended its snout toward Dr. Chun in the same greeting gesture it had first used with Elena. Dr. Chun, following Elena's whispered instructions, extended her hand slowly and allowed the dragon to make contact. The moment Aurora touched Dr. Chen's hand, the scientist gasped. Her eyes widened as the hatchling shared the same welcoming images it had shown Elena weeks earlier. Dr. Chen experienced the full emotional impact of the creature's journey, their losses, their hopes, and their trust. Tears streamed down Dr. Chen's face as she looked at the 5 hatchlings. They're not just intelligent, she said in wonder. They're wise. Elena, do you understand what this means? These beings could revolutionize our understanding of biology, consciousness, even physics itself. Elena felt a wave of relief, so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. She had chosen correctly. Dr. Chun saw the hatchlings as she did, as remarkable individuals rather than specimens to be studied. Over the following hours, Dr. Chun interacted with each hatchling, learning their individual personalities and abilities. Her scientific background allowed her to quickly understand the implications of what the creatures could do. Their biotechnology is beyond anything we've imagined, Dr. Chen said, as Ember demonstrated its matter manipulation abilities by creating a perfect sphere of crystalline material from ordinary sand. They don't just use tools, they create matter itself according to their needs. When Colonel Harrison arrived the next day, Elena repeated the careful introduction process. The retired military officer's reaction was more cautious than Dr. Chen's, but equally positive. His primary concern was not whether the creatures were real, but how to protect them from those who might seek to exploit them. Elena, if word of this gets out, every government on Earth will want to study these beings, Colonel Harrison said. Some will want to understand them, but others will see them only as potential weapons or sources of advanced technology. Shadow seemed to respond to Colonel Harrison's protective instincts. The stealth-capable hatchling approached him and shared images of its scouting abilities, demonstrating how it had been protecting the group from discovery. Colonel Harrison watched in fascination as Shadow phased partially out of visible reality, becoming a translucent outline that could move through solid objects. Remarkable, he said. This creature understands strategic thinking. It's already been serving as your early warning system. Dr. Maria Santos arrived on the 3rd day and provided the final piece of Elena's carefully assembled team. Her background in psychology and trauma recovery proved invaluable in understanding the emotional journey the hatchlings had experienced. These beings have survived not just physical trauma from their damaged shells, but psychological trauma from losing their entire civilization, Dr. Santos observed after spending time with each hatchling. What's remarkable is how well they've adapted and bonded as a family unit. Dr. Santos was particularly drawn to Mist, whose empathic abilities created an immediate connection. This one has taken on the role of emotional caretaker for the group, she noted. It's processing not just its own trauma, but helping its siblings work through theirs. With her team assembled, Elena felt ready to begin the next phase of the hatchlings' integration with human society. But first, they needed to establish a more permanent and secure location where the growing dragons could live safely while continuing to develop their abilities. Colonel Harrison had identified several potential locations, remote military facilities that were no longer in active use, but still maintained security perimeters. Dr. Chun had contacts in the international scientific community who could provide funding and resources without asking uncomfortable questions. Dr. Santos could help design an environment that would support the creature's psychological and social development. But when Elena presented these options to the hatchlings, their response surprised the entire team. Through shared images and emotions, the creatures communicated that they wanted to take a more active role in planning their own future. Aurora interfaced with Elena's computer and began displaying detailed plans for a facility that would serve their needs, while also providing a base for human-dragon collaboration. The design incorporated both human architectural principles and dragon biotechnology, creating something entirely new. Ember showed how they could construct such a facility using its matter manipulation abilities, potentially creating buildings that were grown rather than built, structures that could adapt and evolve as needs changed. PRISM demonstrated how the entire complex could be hidden from satellite surveillance and casual observation using its illusion abilities, making it effectively invisible to unwanted attention. Shadow outlined security protocols that would protect the facility from intrusion while allowing controlled access for trusted individuals. Mist shared the emotional vision that drove all their planning, a place where humans and dragons could work together as equals, sharing knowledge and abilities to solve challenges that neither species could face alone. They're not just planning a place to live, Dr. Santos observed with amazement. They're designing a prototype for interspecies cooperation. Elena looked at the detailed plans the hatchlings had created and realized they had moved far beyond her initial goal of simply keeping the creatures safe. The dragons were proposing to become active partners in humanity's future development. Over the following weeks, the expanded team worked with the hatchlings to refine and implement their ambitious plans. Using Colonel Harrison's contacts, they secured access to a remote valley in the Canadian Rockies that had previously housed a classified research facility. Dr. Chun coordinated with international scientific organizations to establish a legitimate cover for their activities, a research project focused on developing sustainable technologies for extreme environments. Dr. Santos worked with the hatchlings to establish communication protocols that would allow other humans to interact with them safely and effectively. Elena served as the primary liaison between the human and dragon perspectives, translating concepts and intentions when direct mental contact wasn't possible. The construction of a new facility proceeded with unprecedented speed and efficiency. Ember's matter manipulation abilities allowed them to create structures that were stronger, more energy efficient, and more environmentally harmonious than anything human technology could produce alone. Aurora developed power systems that drew energy directly from geothermal, solar, and magnetic sources with 100% efficiency. The facility became completely energy self-sufficient within days of construction. Prism created exterior camouflage so sophisticated that the complex appeared to be nothing more than natural rock formations and vegetation to any form of observation, visual, thermal, or electromagnetic. Shadow established security systems that could detect and track any intrusion without being detected themselves, creating an invisible protective perimeter around the entire valley. Mist designed interior spaces that promoted psychological well-being and cross-species communication, creating environments that felt comfortable and welcoming to both humans and dragons. As the facility neared completion, Elena reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. What had started with 5 injured hatchlings squeezed into damaged shells had evolved into the foundation for a new kind of relationship between species. The dragons had grown into magnificent beings whose abilities continued to expand and develop. They were no longer helpless refugees, but partners in creating something unprecedented in Earth's history. But perhaps most remarkably, the 5 hatchlings had never lost the fundamental qualities that had first touched Elena's heart. Their courage, their compassion for each other, their willingness to trust despite having every reason to fear, and their determination to turn their survival into something meaningful. On the day the facility became fully operational, Elena stood with her human colleagues and 5 dragon friends as Aurora activated the central consciousness interface that would allow them to work together as a truly integrated team. The moment the system came online, Elena felt a profound shift in her understanding of what was possible. Through the interface, human creativity and logic merged seamlessly with dragon wisdom and abilities. Problems that had seemed impossible became manageable. Technologies that had been theoretical became practical. In the weeks that followed, the human-dragon team began developing solutions to challenges that had plagued humanity for generations. They created energy systems that eliminated pollution, agricultural methods that could feed populations without environmental destruction, and communication technologies that could bridge any language or cultural barrier. But Their most important achievement was proving that cooperation between radically different forms of intelligent life was not only possible, but extraordinarily beneficial. Word of their success began to spread carefully through selected networks of scientists, environmentalists, and progressive thinkers. Each new human who was introduced to the dragons came away transformed by the experience, becoming an advocate for the kind of cooperation the facility represented. Elena often returned to the original campsite, where she had first discovered the damaged eggs. The site had been carefully restored to its natural state, but she maintained it as a place of reflection and remembrance. Standing there one evening as the sun set over the desert, Elena was joined by Aurora, who had grown into a magnificent being whose scales caught and reflected the colors of the twilight sky. "Do you ever regret coming here?" Elena asked, as she had many times before. Aurora shared the same response it always gave. Images of Earth as seen from space, beautiful and blue and full of potential. The dragon showed her human cities beginning to incorporate dragon biotechnology, forests regenerating with dragon-enhanced growth techniques, and spacecraft leaving Earth's orbit on missions of exploration powered by human-dragon cooperation. Elena saw the future the hatchlings' parents had dreamed of when they sent their children toward the stars, a universe where different forms of life could meet and create something greater than either could achieve alone. "Thank you," Elena whispered, not just to Aurora, but to all 5 of the remarkable beings who had trusted her with their lives. "Thank you for showing us what we could become." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Elena knew that the hatchlings' journey from their dying homeworld to Earth was just the beginning of a much larger story. Somewhere among those stars might be other refugee eggs from other dying worlds, and perhaps other species that had already learned the lesson Earth was just beginning to understand. The universe was vast and full of wonders beyond imagination, but it didn't have to be lonely. Elena had learned that from 5 dragon hatchlings who had survived being squished like sardines in damaged shells, who had chosen to trust a human they had never met, and who had turned their salvation into an opportunity to save others. Looking up at the infinite expanse of stars, Elena smiled. The real adventure was just beginning, and this time, humanity wouldn't be facing it alone.